Hello and welcome back. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about how I use sketchbooks. So I'm going to crack one open and then we can go through how I use them. We'll jump right into it. So I tend to start, or sometimes at the back, I'll have a materials page where I can see and test out how different materials work on the paper, what doesn't work on the paper, and gain a better understanding of the paper as a whole. This is my first time using a moleskin sketchbook, so I did have a materials page at the front, but these sketchbooks are my main sketchbooks, the art creation. I don't need to do a materials page necessarily in the front of them anymore because I know how the paper works for me now. So you'll see a lot of studies in my sketchbooks. I have some mountain lion studies here. These were done from reference in order to study the facial structure and build my visual library as well. These were skull studies of lynx. And then we have some flowers drawn from observation in my garden. And I used these to come up with an imaginative piece that you'll see in a minute. So the first thing I tend to use my sketchbooks for, as I've mentioned, are studies. Allowing myself to practice things like observation, my mind's eye, my hand-to-eye coordination, shape design. There's all sorts of things that drawing from observation are useful for, and also to build my visual library. I also do studies of artists, and I always make sure to write who the artist is and that it's studies. I don't tend to show these, and I'll skip over other studies if we come across them in my other sketchbooks, because this isn't my work, these are studies of other people, and I try to do them in a respectful manner. So here we have a piece that I did from imagination based on the studies I did from observation. So I came up with her idea, I got the rough basics of her down, and then I did end up going and looking up some hand reference to get the positioning of them right when I went over with a more refined pass. And then I ended up taking this digital to do as a digital illustration. So you'll find imaginative pieces in my sketchbooks as well. And then we have anatomy studying here. So these are, let me increase the brightness a bit for you. It's getting a bit dark. There you go. So these are studies of Morpho, the book Morpho Hands and Feet, because I'm trying to improve my hand drawing at the moment. And then I also have sketches coming up with ideas for commissions. I have more skulls here that were from last week's video. I was trying out drawing in marker and ink, and I found that I really enjoy doing it, so I want to do that a lot more. I have some head studies, trying to study different expressions. And more anatomy studies. This is Loomis. Then I've got a work in progress rough sketch here. I'll just decrease the brightness so you can see it a little bit more easily. So I tend to be very rough when I am starting a piece in order to try and figure out my idea really freely, just get it all onto paper, and then I can refine it from there. So I started refining her face, and there's still quite a lot I want to change down here. I'm going to be changing the position of her hand. It's not going to be awkwardly back like that anymore. So I'm going to go back through and change and refine this a bit more, and then eventually it's going to become either an ink or a digitally inked illustration. On this side, I did this from reference, a chrysalis, and then these two weren't from reference, but they were inspired after I saw a bunch of pictures of, I believe they're called plain nawab caterpillars, and I really loved the almost like tendrils coming out from the mantle on its head, and that ended up, I got inspired to make sort of a helmet design from it for this sort of elven warrior, and then I just ended up really wanting to draw the caterpillar as well, so I drew it from imagination from what I remember them looking like. And that's it for this one for now. This is still a new sketchbook, so it's breaking. And then I also carry around, let's increase the brightness again, there we go. I also carry around pocket sketchbooks whenever I'm out and about. And these ones tend to be a lot more rough, a lot more notes. The previous one, this one, is one of my more neater sketchbooks. I don't write as many notes in them. This one's definitely a lot rougher. So I do have materials. Ooh, that's way too bright. I do have materials at the start. And these I did while on a day out, just in pencil. I did this while on a walk. I only had a minute because someone had to take a call, and it was only about a minute long, so I just took out a couple markers, quickly got this down, and then later on I just quickly went over and did ink on top, just to bring it together. And then I have some morpho studies again here. This I did from imagination, just like a doodle, while I was sat on the bench outside. This I did while sat on a bench watching some swans, and this is actually a baby swan. I believe they're called cygnets. It was grooming itself, and this is a typical sort of rough stage for me, and then once I get the rough idea down, I'll go in and I'll do tighter passes on top, so I'll do tighter line work on top. I do want to go back to this and tighten it up at some point. I kind of want to maybe even make an ink illustration out of it at some point. And you'll find drawing from life, you often don't get a lot of time, so it's important for me to make use of the time I do have, quickly get an idea down, and then I can always go back to it if I want to. This I did while waiting at the dentist. Again, you can take advantage of any time you have, and it's especially useful if you do have a pocket sketchbook that you can take advantage of. And I just did these from imagination, constantly practicing fundamentals. This was a bit more of a automatic drawing doodle, just to wind down and relax, just slowly doing sort of fantastical shapes. And I'll give you a quick look in one of my older ones. I've got, again, studies. These are in ballpoint. We'll have again loads of anatomy practices. I think in here somewhere, yep, here I did the fantasy head challenge, which is based on Med's Fantasy Heads challenge, but I did 50 heads instead of his recommended 30. And if you don't know about that challenge, I really recommend looking up. If you just look up Med's Fantasy Heads on YouTube, I think you should be able to find it, but it's all drawing fantasy heads from reference for 10 days straight. And I did all of the challenge in this book. So, without making this video too long, to summarise, I tend to not be too concerned with always having aesthetically pleasing sketchbooks. I will make aesthetically pleasing pages if I feel like it, but I want to really improve, get my mileage in, fail, learn, and ultimately find my artistic voice by doing loads of studying, loads of learning from observation, and then creating from imagination. That's what I was going to say. So there'll be notes, there'll be thumbnails, there'll be really rough ideas, there'll be rough things I've drawn from life in like a few seconds or a minute. There'll be notes of courses I'm learning right now. There'll be relaxing sketches I did while winding down for the evening. And there'll even be full ink pieces and illustrations in them sometimes. And then sometimes there will be aesthetically pleasing spreads as well. For me, to round it all up, sketchbooks are how I use them, are for everything pretty much. They are an integral part of my practice and I go through tons of them. This selection here is just 2022 and late 2021, and this isn't even all of them. I just decided to pick out a couple depending on what I wanted to go through today. But let me know in the comments, how do you use your sketchbooks? Do you use them purely aesthetically, where you like every single spread to almost be like a finished piece? Do you like doing tons and tons of studies and you don't care at all for aesthetics? Are you somewhere in the middle? Or do you just like doing stuff from imagination, doodling? Let me know in the comments. I think sketchbooks are very individual to each artist, and it's really interesting for me, and I'm sure it is for other people, to find out how different artists use them. So let's all have a little discussion in the comments. But other than that, I will see you next week. Goodbye.